But I want to begin with a few moments with a question that I received from Prasanna ji. So basically, the gist of Prasanna's question, I think, runs through the entirety of our study and discussion of Nirvana Shatakam. But he was asking, in essence, how do we incorporate this wisdom, this teaching into our lives? How does the knowledge of Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham translate into our interactions with others, with people, and not only human beings, but with the world of nature? Because as he puts it, if I don't incorporate this profound truth in my life, then the knowledge is pretty much useless. In other words, as we say, in the Bhagavad Gita, it's just jnana, it is not vijnana. So we also have a term for it, which is indirect knowledge, which is paroksha jnana, something I know, but I only know it in the form of words. And then aparoksha jnana, that knowledge which is immediate, and that knowledge which enters into my being. So we also distinguish between paroksha jnana and aparoksha jnana. So Prasanna ji's question basically is, how do we ensure that this, what we are learning, especially in the affirmations of this poem by Shankara, Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham, how does it become integrated as part of our lives? So I think we have to start by, first of all, acknowledging that Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham is a teaching about who I am, about who you are. It is not that my Atma is Chidananda Rupa, Shivoham, Shivoham. It is that I am that. This is why the word aham is there. Shivoham, Shivo aham. It is not that some remote Atma, my Atma somewhere is Chidananda. I am Chidananda. This is who I am. This is my identity. This is your identity. That's the first important. Shiva aham, Chidananda Rupa, Shivo aham, Shivo aham. This teaching, Chidananda Rupa, Shivoham, Shivoham, is meant to correct long established ways of thinking about ourselves. So it is a corrective teaching. It removes avidya and points out the truth about you, the truth about myself. When I understand myself to be Chidananda Rupa, it is meant to negate, false ways of understanding myself. Avidya, Atma avidya, ignorance about one's self. But we are more than likely to become forgetful, even though we may get a glimpse into a different vision of who we are more than likely to become forgetful of a new understanding and to revert back to long established and habitual ways of thinking. Because knowledge takes some time to work its way, to counter long established patterns of thinking and long established patterns of feeling, which tend to reassert themselves in daily life. So in order to make this teaching, as Prasanna asked me, how do we integrate it into our interactions? So I would say first, we have to start with ourselves. We have to start with who we are. And we need to remind ourselves daily, this knowledge is not going to be meaningful unless it is integrated into a daily practice. So we need to remind ourselves daily. We need some form of daily practice to ensure that we are not forgetful. To remind ourselves, Chidananda Rupa Shivoham, Shivoham, to replace ingrained ways of thinking. We need daily, whatever you choose to call it. It may be sadhana or abhyasa, but our tradition has given us many beautiful ways of reminding us. Many satsangs ago, I had shared, this is the time when we met at the mandir. Some of you might have been there and you would remember this verse that I had shared with you. It's a morning prayer. So it begins, Prataf Smarami. Smaranam, to remember, in the morning. Prataf Smarami. What do I remember? This is a prayer to be recited upon awakening daily. So this is the kind of practice that I am speaking about. Prataf Smarami. In the morning, as I awake at dawn, Hridi Samspuraratma Tattvam. I remember this, the self-shining Atma that I am. Hridi, in my heart, I remember Samspura, the self-shining, the self-effulgent Atma that I am. Sachit Sukham. Sachit Sukham is the same as Chidananda, which is Chidananda Rupa or Sachit Sukham. Paramahamsa Gatim Turiyam, and which is the goal of all of the great teachers of my tradition. Yat Swapna Jagara Sushuptim Aveti Nityam, that which is present in all the states of my life today, whether I am waking, dreaming, or sleeping. Yat Swapna Jagara Sushuptim Aveti Nityam, eternal. Tad Brahma Aham. Tad Brahma, that one, I am. Nacha bhuta sangaha, not the elements that make up my body. It's a very beautiful verse, but I share it as a kind of practice that we need, a kind of daily practice that we need, early morning practice that brings us to focus on this truth of ourselves. But there may be other, you may choose to recite what we are learning. Mano buddhi hankara chittani naham. Nacha srota jighve, nacha grana netra, nacha vyoma bhumir na tejo na vayu, chidananda rupa shivoham shivoham. That line alone is enough. Chidananda rupa shivoham shivoham. So that's where I would start. Secondly, moving from that to Prasanna's question about relationships, there's a lot to be said, but I would mention two things which I know he will agree with me fully on. I think that this knowledge, Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham, when I say that, I recognize that this is the truth, not only about me, but it's the truth of every being. What is true for me is true for you. It's the truth for everyone, whether someone knows it or not. Chidananda Rupa, Shivoham Shivoham is the nature of all human beings. And so for me, it summons me to encounter every being with the deepest reverence, the deepest respect for others. And I would say even more than respect, I add the word reverence for others. Reverence has to do with sacredness, the sacred word of the other. At the beginning of this semester, in August, I was asked by my college, St. Olaf College, to deliver the opening convocation address to all of our students, our faculty, our staff. I had posted this, and I know some of you may have seen it, but I mention it because I think I want to answer Prasanna's question in a personal way as well. And I said there that in preparing each day for my role as a teacher in the classroom, like all of my teachers, I mean, John is here. John is a professor for most of his for most of his life. You know, in preparing for my classes, like all of my colleagues, I give a lot of thought to the content of what I'm going to teach on that day. And I think also of what strategies, what methods I will use to draw my students into the material so that they would be excited about what I want to share with them on that day. But before I go to that classroom, my preparation, what I call my teaching sadhana, my teaching practice, always includes a quiet moment of mindful recollection of the sacred, of Chidananda Atma that is present in each one of my students. It's as important as mastering my material. This awakens in me as a teacher an attitude of reverence as I enter into that classroom. For me, the classroom is a sacred space. It's a sacred space because Chidananda is present in every one of my students. So I enter my classroom as a sacred space, conscious of and delighting in the sacredness of my students. And this, my value for my students, requires me to engage them respectfully, to be attentive to their words and to be attentive to their silence. A vision of Chidananda Rupa opens my heart to every student. And I know that I am a better teacher for that fact, because I see the sacred in each one of my students. I give it as an example of what this teaching can mean. And the second point I want to make, again, very briefly, in addition to transforming relationships through respect and reverence, I want to say that this teaching is a teaching that awakens, we can use different words, awakens empathy. It awakens the heart into empathy. There's a very beautiful verse from the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. I think it's the 32nd verse. Atma upamena sarvatra samam pashyati yorjuna sukham va yadi va dukham sa yogi paramo mataha. It's a very fascinating verse. Sa yogi paramo mataha. So Sri Krishna says, this is for me the best of yogis. Sa yogi paramo. This is the best of yogis. And who is the best of yogis? Atma pamena sarvatras samam pashyati yorjuna sukham va yadi va dukham. The one who has the empathy to identify with others in sukham or dukham, in their joy or in their pain, is the best yogi. So empathy means, entering into, placing oneself where the other stands, whether the other is in a condition of joy or in a condition of suffering. Identifying with others. When others are happy, I share their joy. I'm not envious of their happiness. And when they are in conditions of suffering, my heart opens up in compassion to them. So the Gita also speaks about sarva bhuta hite rataha, one who rejoices in the well-being of others. I think, the text is speaking here about empathy. The text is speaking here about compassion. So these two virtues, reverence for others and empathy for others, do not exclude. They're not limited by religion, by ethnicity, by nationality, and I would say not even by species. It's a all-inclusive reverence, an all-inclusive empathy. These are, for me, the most important outcomes of this knowledge. And these, for me, are the virtues that transform this from paroksha jnana, from indirect knowledge to direct knowledge, from jnana to vijnana. When this wisdom begins to bloom in our lives, in these kinds of virtues, then it's truly wisdom. Until then, it's not wisdom. It's words that we know. When it begins to be transformed, it expresses itself in this way of being. And all of this requires, mindfulness, mindful practice. So there is more that, we can add, but I just wanted to give a direction to this wonderful question from Prasanna, which I think is really very important for all of us to contemplate as we study this text.